The reason I started this whole thing, and maybe some of you've heard it, but there's a few reasons, but the primary reason was I was just tired of seeing my friends kill themselves, to be frank. Kill themselves, struggle with addiction, and lose relationships with their families and friends, particularly when they separated from service, and some when they were still in service, in uniform, ended up taking their lives and ran on hard times. And instead of standing by and saying, somebody who kills himself, they're just selfish, or shake your head and say, oh, that's just unfortunate, I decided to take an active role in hopefully helping people out. And it takes vulnerability to go ask for help. And I'd hoped through some of these stories and through the guests and through just sharing, we can maybe help somebody out. Welcome back to the Leading with Vulnerability podcast. You guys are all very familiar with me at this point. I'm your host, Yuma Barnett, and on today's episode of the podcast, we're going to wrap up season 1 of this podcast. Started this thing June 30th of last year was when the first 3 episodes first aired. And since then, it has been quite a journey, something I would have never expected, especially on a personal level. This has been like therapy for me every time I have some of these conversations with people. It's just been phenomenal. And since launching it, I've had over 3,000 hours of watch and listen time. I've received 200 plus messages and texts and emails over what will be, after this episode, 43 episodes in season 1. And I debated if I wanted to do seasons or if I just wanted to keep going. Keep going as long as I could and keep trying to put one out every week. But I realized as a one-man band here, I was starting to, that's a lot to do. So I'm going to take about 30 days off here, going to bank some new episodes, going to do a little bit of traveling, going on the road and doing some interviews. And we'll be back with the podcast on July 7th. But I just wanted to wrap some things up here. And as this first season comes to an end. And even though I've been on the air for almost a year now, 43 episodes, I'm still asked quite often why I'm doing this podcast, why vulnerability, why leading with vulnerability. I recently, yesterday, I had a comment on a LinkedIn. It was said, please stop the vulnerability movement. Employees are taking advantage of it. And I understand not everybody's going to like what you do. I'm not real sure how you take advantage of vulnerability, but I will not stop. I'm going to keep going. The reason I started this whole thing, and maybe some of you've heard it, but there's a few reasons, but the primary reason was I was just tired of seeing my friends kill themselves, to be frank. Kill themselves, struggle with addiction, and lose relationships with their families and friends, particularly when they separated from service, and some when they were still in service, in uniform, ended up taking their lives and ran on hard times. And instead of standing by and saying, somebody who kills himself, they're just selfish, or shake your head and say, oh, that's just unfortunate, I decided to take an active role in hopefully helping people out. And it takes vulnerability to go ask for help. And I'd hoped through some of these stories and through the guests and through just sharing, we can maybe help somebody out. And that's the real reason behind the podcast. When I say my friends, I consider everybody that ever put on a uniform that's in that 1% of the U.S. population to have served their country as a friend. And even closer are those of the SOF enterprises, and then, of the 75th Ranger Regiment. And we've had far too many people take their own lives and struggle with, addiction of alcohol and drugs when they've separated from service, and they didn't have to. A lot of them just didn't know where to turn for help, or didn't know that other people out there had been through and gone through some of the same things. And hopefully by seeing others that they looked up to, or other leaders that have also struggled, they would raise their hand and say, hey, I need a little help here. So you're all my friend. If this podcast can make that 22, veteran suicides a day go to 21, it's worth it. And I thought by sharing stories of leadership, parenting, and life through the vulnerability, it would help people with their struggles. Maybe they would find some commonality with one of the guests and be inspired to either take action or seek help of their own, or help somebody else out, or be a listening ear for somebody else. So um, it's been an amazing thing to do, and I've really enjoyed it. I think vulnerability, that's a yucky word in my former line of work, but I think it really unlocks our leadership potential, helping us become influential leaders. And leadership at its base is influence. And, again, we've talked about it before, the dirtiness of the word influence and influencer in today's society, but leadership is influence. And hopefully through these conversations, that influence can be positive. And at some point in my life, and in probably a lot of your lives, you were inspired or influenced by a leader of yours. And if you're not, or if you're going through a hard time and you're watching this podcast and you see some of the people we have on here, like Dave White, who, gets an MBA from Ohio State University, or Ray Perez, who, was the first NCO on active duty to go up to Emory and get an executive MBA, from the ranches and field work of Texas, to an executive MBA at Emory, to Kane American, who, survived the devastating IED blast and came all the way back to be a sergeant major, and continuing to serve our country. So there's some inspiring stories out there, and some influential leaders. And that's the reason behind this podcast. And that's kind of been the reason behind all of season 1. And it can get a little heavy. We're talking about divorce, losing friends in combat. We had Pat Merrick on here who was talking about losing her own son in war, one of the first casualties of the global war on terrorism. And it's all, why do I do it? So people understand they're not alone, and that they're greater than their defeats, that they can pick themselves up off the mat or get back on the horse that bucked them off and keep going. And I'm here, and there are other people here that are willing to listen and help and give you guidance. And that has happened. That has happened. And I'll say that because, like I said, I didn't really know what I was doing when I started this. I just knew there were some stories out there that needed to be shared. And it was on one of the very first episodes I had. I received a message from a listener, and I didn't know the listener at all. He just reached out and he shared how one small segment from one podcast episode saved a life. And it was his life. He was ready to take his own life until the podcast. Till he heard and related with what that person in the podcast interview had went through and made it through on the other side. And he was going through something similar that was really weighing on him. And he thought maybe his only way out was to take his own life, which is unfortunate. But because of this podcast, because of that episode, he didn't. And in my mind, it's worth it. So for maybe if it was only for that one day, it went from 22 to 21, 100% worth it. 100% worth the pain that this can sometimes be to do. That's why I put myself out there, and that's why I do it. And I hope you guys stay with me through our little hiatus here as I go and interview some people on the road and take some time for myself. Now, a little bit looking into the future. Yes, this is the end of season 1. Taking a break for about 30 days, not abandoning you. Like I said, I'm going to go on the road, do some interviews. We have some great guests coming up, both in person and virtually. And although the podcast isn't going to be there every Thursday morning for you, starting in July, on bi-weekly upfront, will be the new Leading with Vulnerability live show. And yes, you heard that correctly. I'm going to start doing a live show every Wednesday at 7. That's what it's templated to be. And what is it? What is the live show? Well, the working title, and I understand this is kind of weak and very regular Army of me, but the working title is NCO NN. So you think Non-Commissioned Officer News Network. And why am I doing this? So one thing I've noticed since I've separated is I miss those interactions I used to have with other Rangers and other service members, the water cooler talk, where you talked about current events, you talked about politics, you talked about sports, and you talked about it in an NCO frame of mind. It was very brutal, upfront, and honest conversation. And I miss having those conversations. And so, since I can't be around a platoon or a company of Rangers every day, I'm going to have those conversations with you here in the virtual world, and hopefully you guys will chime in and give your feedback in the comments on this, and it'll be fun. It'll be serious. It'll be fun, but I'm going to take a look at some of the current events for that 2-week period, and just throw it out there and give you my NCO thoughts on it, because every time I turn on Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, or whatever, I see a 06 through retired 4-star general giving their opinion. Where are the NCOs giving their opinion? Because you know that those officers, they didn't get where they are without a quality NCO behind them, teaching, coaching, and mentoring. So I'm gonna be the NCO face of this, and give my opinion on a range of topics. So it should be fun. Maybe it'll bomb and I won't have to do it again, but it's something I think is just it'll be entertaining at the least, and you guys can have a laugh at my expense. A couple of admin notes and thank yous. First, to the patrons out there who support me on Patreon. Support me, support the podcast, really. Your $10 a month does more to help me keep this going than you will ever know. And for one, it just keeps me accountable, because I know somebody's out there is contributing to this. And then I feel like I have to deliver quality content. So, and I should, since you're helping keep this thing, keep the lights on, literally, on the podcast. If you're a patron and you're watching, I want to say thank you. And last year, for a gift, I sent all of you guys a t-shirt and a coffee mug, which I still have some of. If somebody would like to purchase them, let me know. This year, I'm going to do patron gifts every year. This year, it's going to be your choice of a photo, 11 by 14 photo. And if you're watching, hit me up, leave me a message, shoot me a text, email, whatever, and tell me which picture you would like. So your options are this gateway to the regiment, as I call it. That's the picture of the Cole Range sign, which anybody who's worn a tan or black beret with the Ranger insignia on the front of it knows the meaning of this place. The second one you can choose from is this land of broken backs and bad knees, especially in my case. It's the U.S. Army Airborne School. You got the mock-ups there and the towers, and a lot of us that listen to this, spend a quality 3 weeks running slow and for long distances, destroying our knees around this place. So another good one if you look back on those memories more fondly than you did when you were actually participating in some of that stuff there. Next is this, I call it Dust and Bone. It's this picture of this cow skull that I took on my mom's ranch out in New Mexico. I call it the Artifact of the Southwest. And then the last one you have to choose from, which I got a lot of feedback from when I just posted it on social media, is these horses in the snowstorm. So it's another picture I took of my mom's horses out there in New Mexico, and it just shows, it's just a beautiful shot, I think. So please, if you're listening, you're a patron, let me know which one you want. If you're interested in becoming a patron, go over to the Barnett Multimedia .com, go to podcast, and then click become a patron, and you can learn more about it without actually having to become. It'll just give you some more information. And then for all you guys out there, and girls and kids, there's some kids that listen and give me feedback. Thanks for listening. Like I said, this is more therapy for me than it is anything else, to get on here and share with you guys every week and share these stories of these incredible human beings that come on here and show a little bit of vulnerability when it's completely unnatural to us in the environments that most of us came from. It's been an awesome experience. It's been an awesome 43 episodes. I hope you guys all enjoy the heck out of your summers. And remember, vulnerability is not a weakness. It's a superpower, and it can help you unlock the greatest life possible. So use it to your advantage. I don't think you can exploit vulnerability. or that there's too much vulnerability out there. If not, if anything, there needs to be more. So thanks for listening. Thanks for everything. Keep the stuff coming, and hopefully you'll check in with us on the live show coming up on the first Wednesday in July, I believe is what it's going to be. So I'll put it all out there. You guys can get on there and watch me try to do this thing live, which should be, like I said, at a minimum, it's going to be entertaining. But thanks again. It's been awesome. See you back on the podcast July 7th. And oh, correction. The live show starts in June. I think it's June 7th, not July 7th. So tune in to the live stuff. I'll see you on the live side. And the cool thing with the live, you can give me feedback immediately and tell me that I'm not very good at what I do. So that's going to be great. Love you guys. Mean it. Take care. We'll see you guys later.